Yo, what up, guys? This is the voice of Mr. Solution. Okay, so as a follow-up to our previous analysis on Bitcoin, we just want to start from the monthly time frame. Okay, then we get to the 15 minutes time frame. Meanwhile, before we commence, if you're a new visitor to my channel, or you've been visiting but you've not subscribed, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification icon so that anytime I go live, anytime I upload a new video, you'll be the first to be notified about it. All right, so before us here is the monthly BTC chart. Of course, the data we have here is limited. It's limited because what we are using is the FTX exchange. And of course, FTX is actually a relatively new trading exchange. So the data they have is limited, but we really do not need all those previous information. We just need to focus on what is happening now, right? So before us here is the monthly time frame of BTC, and so far the month just started today. Meanwhile, before we commence, happy 1st May, happy new month to all my fans, to all my friends, to all the people that have, always been supporting me on this and all that. I deeply appreciate you all. May the month be a very promising one for us. May it be a very profitable one for us in the course of our trading, right? So we have this monthly chart, and the month just started here, just began today, and you can see this very candle that is forming. It's the monthly candle for BTC. That's for the month of May, actually. So taking it back, looking at what had happened before, you can see this very resistance with this very support we've always had, and then taking cognizance into previous actions around that area, you can see that for some time now, many times, this very support zone has been tested. It had been tested, actually, and then tested it May 2001, tested 2021, actually, tested it around June, tested it again around July, and then we have it here being tested again around the 1st of January, tested it again around 1st of February, and then we have it here again around April, although it's quite didn't it actually began here, and then it began here, then closed there. So we wouldn't really say it's more like tested, but then it just kind of touched it. Now we have this very candle, this very May candle that is being formed. Now there's something I want us to understand. You can see that this candle actually moved up to this very moment, but up to this very point. Yes, I think a couple of minutes ago, we saw BTC fly as high as 38,682. Yeah, that was the highest point it got to so far. That's for today being and 1st of May. Yeah. So, but right now you can see this very you can see how the chart is behaving around there. Look at what the candle is doing, and so far, for the fact that this candle hasn't gone above this very channel, for the fact that it hasn't gone above this very support channel, so chances are that we could distill down to this very level. There is still a possibility of us testing a low of 35K, or worst case scenario, we could equally see 34K. So from the monthly chart, although it's still quite too early for us to start judging, yeah, it's relatively too early for us to start judging, but then we can actually use what is happening now to extrapolate what will happen futuristically. So we've seen it go above here, but so far it hasn't gone above it. So it's actually within this very support, is actually within this very channel. So chances are that we could still, get some lows. BTC could still push down to the lower lower region of this very channel. That's for the monthly. You remember, nothing is cast in stone. This is not in any way intended to serve as a financial advice. So I'm just trying to guide you all from what I'm saying, so that you can on your own decide to take action or take any trading decision of your choice. Okay, so that's for the monthly. Then from the monthly, we switch to the weekly. Let's go to the weekly chart to examine what it is presenting before us. So right now we have the weekly chart before us, and this is really not looking nice. Yeah, I must say that the weekly chart is really not looking nice. And then we are hoping that this very, the weekly candle hasn't really formed. It will start forming from tomorrow. So we are still dealing with this current week. So the new weekly candle will start forming from tomorrow. Yeah. So we are still dealing with this very current weekly candles, which is this one, which is exactly the one we examined yesterday. Now I want us to see something. If let's just hope that this candle, right, this current weekly candle doesn't close anywhere below this a very channel. If let's pray it doesn't close anywhere below it, because if it does, chances are that the next one that will form might still see us going to the low. So from the weekly chart, BTC still has this bearish tendency. We still see this bearish tendency in BTC. That's for the weekly chart. Although it's too early, it's actually too early for us to judge. We still have a couple of hours before this week before today ends, so to say. So after the end of this weekly candle, we definitely start seeing another one, maybe from tomorrow, just a couple of hours from now. But so far, the saving grace, the only prayer we have, especially for the bulls, their prayer would be for BTC not to close anywhere below this very channel. Let them hope that BTC doesn't close anywhere below this channel. Right now, you can see where it is a bit above it, So anything low, anything maybe 37.5 or thereabout, definitely BTC is closing below this very upsloping support. So let's just hope it doesn't do that. For the bulls should pray that it doesn't close below it, because if it does, then chances are that the bearishness will definitely continue. So from the weekly, we now go to daily to see what the daily is as well presenting to us. For the daily chart, we also still have these bearish trappings. We still have this bearish tendency. Now, earlier before now, we saw BTC go to 38,682, and then this is a rejection. As we've always said that whenever you see a wick, whenever you see the formation of a wick in a chart, it means rejection. So we saw the bulls that at the time, bulls wanted to push the price of BTC up, but then they couldn't do that. Spot this very resistance. So there's actually a resistance around 39,232. So the bulls couldn't actually push BTC beyond this very resistance zone. The furthest they could go so far was 38,682. That was the furthest they could go before the BS started pushing the price down. So this connotes rejection. In other words, it means that the bears are still in charge. It means that the bears are still in charge. Of course, as we rightly said yesterday during our class, we said that BTC currently portrays this downtrend. We still have this downtrend outlook we are seeing on BTC, series of lower highs and lower lows and all that. This signifies this very line, this downsloping line, this signifies a weakness of the uptrend. Okay, it signifies a downtrend because we have a series of lower highs. Don't mind this very weak, just actually a rejection. So far BTC has actually been going down, and then you can see that the support as well is down sloping. Okay, remember what we said when we examined the weekly chart. We said we hope that BTC doesn't close anywhere below this very channel, and the way it's looking is as if it really wants to do that, but it's quite too early to conclude. We wouldn't want to conclude yet, so let's just wait to see how it goes. But so far we've spotted this rejection. Meaning that the bears are still controlling the market. Anything can always happen. We are all students of the market. The market can always pull any stunt it wants. Okay, so from the daily, let's now flip to the 4-hour chart to get what the 4-hour is telling us. Then we can rightly prepare ourselves in anticipation of what is to come. So this is the 4-hour chart. We have here the 4-hour chart. Remember that this very diagonal line, this very line here, this horizontal line, we said it's actually a support for the daily chart. Yeah, it's a support for the daily time frame. That's the daily chart. And so far, BTC hasn't actually gone anything close to it. BTC hasn't gone anything close to it. The farthest it went was this 38,682 before there was a rejection. Yes, before there was this rejection. So far, BTC is actually down. Now, it's on this 4-hour that you can clearly see the series of lower highs I was talking about in the daily. You can see this one. this was a high, and then we had this rejection here. We saw BTC pushing up to this very level, but then couldn't sustain the tempo. It got rejected, and so far we've been having a series of high. This was high, a high, another high, another high. Now when you check it, objectively look at it, see that it's actually been making a series of high, and series of high connotes what? Connotes weakness. It connotes that the bears are dominating. It connotes the domination of the bears. So from the 4-hour chart, you can see that BTC is still bearish. Yes, BTC is still bearish, but then we can't really conclude. Anything can always happen. 1 hour is quite big enough for the market to pull a stunt. So for the 4-hour, we can rightly say that BTC is still down. Yes, BTC is still showing some signs of weakness, which for us to change our mind, we need to see BTC defeat this current resistance that's around 39,232. BTC needs to cross above it for us to, to an extent, accommodate the bulls for the meantime. It doesn't really mean that if BTC goes above it, that the market has changed, the trend has changed. No, there's still a tendency of getting a rejection. Remember what happened here? We saw BTC flipping the 200-day exponential moving average on the daily. We thought the bull market would continue, the bulls would keep dominating. All of a sudden we spotted the rejection. So that BTC crosses 39K doesn't really mean that the bulls will start dominating or that the market has changed. Even if it does, if it doesn't quite go above it, it still goes to point to the fact that we still have a series of lower high, because if another high forms, that doesn't go beyond this, if another high forms on the 4-hour or maybe on the daily that doesn't go beyond this very high we've already had here, you can't still call it a bull. You can't call it a bullish move. Yeah, because it will definitely end up as a series of lower highs. In other words, it shows that the bears are still dominating. Okay, so we still have this very resistance to contend with, 39K resistance, and now there is also another resistance that's 40K, $40,300. That's also another resistance that BTC needs to contend with, on its way to flipping bullish. Okay, so it has a lot of forces to contend with, but so far look at where it still is, look at where BTC still is. So we don't really say that the bull market is on, we don't really say that the bulls are dominating. So for the 4-hour chart, we still have this bearish setup. Then from the 4-hour, let's go to the 1-hour time frame. Yeah, so we have the 1-hour chart. I think the 1-hour kind of paints a more obvious picture. It paints a more obvious portrait for us. We still have our series of lower highs and then lower lows. Now recall what happened there. Recall what happened when we analyzed the charts. We spotted these bearish pennants when we examined the 15-minute time frame, and we said it was going to drop. When we get to the 15-minute time frame, we see that clearly. Okay, so we saw BTC in 1 hour falling from here, coming back to test these very supports, which I showed us when we did the yesterday's analysis. I told us that there was a tendency of BTC coming back to test 37K, and of course it did that. Not only did it test the support, it even went lower than that, testing as low as 37.4, please. BTC falling to as low as 37,400 as at yesterday. But when we were analyzing it, it was around here, and then we said there was a high chance of BTC, coming back to test 37K, and exactly that was what happened. So it tested the support, and then I told us then that if I was to take a trade, I wouldn't really go with what the textbook would always tell us, that whenever you spot a bearish tenant, the measured move and all that, I would be taking my profit around this very support, and which was exactly what I did, because I later entered the trade. I took my profits, even though I later went below that, but risk management and all that. So I needed to be very, very careful. I needed to be very conservative in my money management and all that. So I took my profits. Immediately I saw it get to 37,750. That was actually where I took my profit. Of course, it went there. It touched there, even went lower than that, but look at the rapid rejection and all that. So if I had stayed in this trade, maybe if I hadn't taken my profit, or probably I was trying to follow what the textbook would always tell us whenever you spot a bearish pennant, maybe the profit I made, I would have lost it back into the market. So that was why I decided to take my profits here. So for the 1 hour chart, it's still the same thing. We still have this bearish, we still have this bearish setup. We still see the BS dominating in the 1 hour chart. Okay, so remember, we still have this very resistance to contend with. There's still another resistance here to contend with. So it all goes to show that the 1 hour chart is still bearish. 1 hour chart is still bearish for BTC. It's still bearish for BTC. Of course, we are getting a support. We have this support here. We saw this price, you know, as it touched here, went lower than that, went up again, came back and almost touched. It didn't really, it hasn't really quite touched it, but it almost did touch it. Okay, so if this thing doesn't, or if the move doesn't occur, if the move doesn't continue up, so there's still a tendency of this price coming back again to retest the support. There's still a tendency of it coming back to retest the support. So it's too early to conclude. It's too early to conclude. Anything can always happen. So that's for the 1 hour chart. So generally, the 1 hour is still having this bearish setup, so to say. We still see the bearish setup on the 1 hour. So from the 1 hour, let's go to the final time. So this is the 15-minute time frame. Yes, I think this is more conspicuous. Okay, what we wanted to show on the other one is actually more obvious. And remember this bearish pennant we spotted when we did yesterday's analysis. And then from there, we measured our measured move, which was the distance between where these drops started happening to the point where the pennant started forming, which was supposed to give us this very length. It was supposed to give us this very length. That BTC was supposed to get to 36K, but that's the textbook. That's the textbook chart. It's one thing for textbook to say one thing. It's also another thing for the chart to totally display something else. And I guess that was exactly what happened there. No, BTC actually dropped, but it didn't actually get to that very measured move that textbook chart said. Okay, so that's why it's always very good to be very careful. Don't really take anything you read from textbook. Make sure you scrutinize it and then make the final decision yourself. Don't base it off what textbook says and all that. Okay, so now we have these very charts. Okay, I think there is something we need to observe here. We need to observe this. We need to observe this very move. We need to observe this very setup here. These very charts here. Okay, we have these here. We have these here. We have these here. Remember that this is not a candlestick, or I should probably remove it. Maybe later I'll attach it. This is not a candle. So we have these here. We have these here. Okay, maybe I should change it to white so that it will be more obvious. Okay, we have that. And then we have these as well. We have these as well. We have these very charts as well. Okay. This gives us a totally different vibe from what we've always had in the other time frames. Okay. So we have these one as well. We have these as well. Okay, we have these as well. So just by me looking at this, you can equally see that this is still a downtrend, that BTC is actually making a series of lower highs and lower lows. So it's still a downtrend. And also, see, there is actually this support here. There is the presence of this very support. I should bring it down. There is this support we have here. We have this support here. We have this support around that 37K. We have the 37K support. So this is actually this is more like a fake out. Yeah, it's a fake out. So we had this fake out initially because immediately it got rejected. So we have this support around 37K. So we should footnote that support in case the price of BTC moves outside this very support. If it closes below this very support that the 15-minute time frame is showing us, in other words, there's a possibility of us seeing BTC get back to, because this is the next support. After this support, this is the very next support that BTC will witness. This is the one, and that's for the 15-minute time frame anyways. So we will be having another support around here. Maybe let's say BTC flips that, moves below that, and then gets into this. So there's a tendency of us seeing BTC get to 36K, yes, which was what we would have had initially if these very pennants had continued. If this pennant had continued, maybe, let's say we didn't have this rejection we had there, and then it had continued falling. the BTC was supposed to have moved from here. It was supposed to have moved from here to this 36K region, to this 36K price, which is exactly what we would have if the BTC defeats this current support that it's facing, this very support that is holding it. BTC goes below that, if it breaks this very support, then we are going to definitely see BTC get to 36K, which is, like I said, which is what would have had if this very measured move we had there, if this move had continued, this very move, if it had continued, we would have seen BTC. It should have pushed BTC to 36K. Unfortunately, it didn't happen exactly like that. You see that? So if it had continued, it should have moved from that place down to this very 36K, which is exactly what we would have if BTC eventually crosses below this very, closes below this very resistance support that is holding it. If it goes lower than that, the next support we are going to have is something around there, which is also, which definitely goes to prove that this is actually 100% bearish pennant. This 100% bearish pennant, and of course the measured move was actually correct. But like we said, price doesn't move in a straight line. It moves. It's a series of zigzag moves and all that. So you don't really expect it to start falling straight like that. That you got this measured move doesn't mean that BTC will just move like that and get to 36K. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, depending on the buy and sell pressure of the market. All right, guys. So that's just a little thing I want us to, take into perspective. That's what I want us to consider, so that you can adequately plan your trade the coming week. Know what to anticipate. We've examined the monthly, from monthly, weekly, daily, 4 hour, 1 hour, and finally we settled at the 15-minute time frame. So this will give you a clearer perspective and then help you to, consider both nuances and know how to plan your trade. So guys, till I come your way again, I remain your man, Mr. X to the O to the L to the U to the Sean, Mr. Solution. Hands ahead. Salutes.